The map of our world is about to change. And I'm not talking about China breaching boundaries. I'm talking about the continent of Africa splitting into two. It's being predicted now. An entirely new ocean could emerge in the African continent.
Will the East African Rift split the continent and create a new ocean, or will it fizzle out? Keep watching to find out. Africa. It's the second largest continent on our planet, and it's full of amazing stories and history. Africa is like a treasure chest filled with different landscapes, from vast deserts to lush jungles, and it's home to some of the world's most incredible wildlife, like lions, elephants, and giraffes. Long ago, Africa was the birthplace of many ancient civilizations, like the Egyptians, who built the famous pyramids, and the great kingdom of Mali, known for its wealth and wisdom. People in Africa have been making beautiful art and music for thousands of years, telling their stories through colorful paintings and rhythmic drum beats. Africa's history is rich and diverse, and continues to be a place of innovation and growth today. In the heart of the massive continent of Africa, there's a giant split happening. The second largest continent in the world is actually being pulled apart. This enormous crack is known as the East African Rift, and it's like a long, deep valley that stretches for about 2,175 miles, which is as long as 7,000 football fields lined up next to each other. This rift starts near the Red Sea, which is way up north, and goes all the way down to Mozambique in the south. The Earth's crust, which is like a hard shell around our planet, is slowly tearing apart along this line. Scientists from places like the Geological Society of London are really interested in this crack because it's like a big jigsaw puzzle. They're studying it to understand more about how our planet is changing and how continents like Africa are shaping themselves. It's like a super slow-motion adventure, and nobody knows exactly when or how it will end. But one thing's for sure, Africa's story is still being written. And the East African Rift is just one exciting chapter. Will Africa ever break apart entirely? And if it does, when will it happen? To understand this puzzle, we need to check out the Earth's tectonic plates, which are like pieces of the planet's skin. These plates can either bump into each other, building big mountains, or drift away, making deep valleys. It's a bit like playing with building blocks, and these blocks are shaping Africa's future. That's all because of two huge puzzle pieces: the Somalian tectonic plate and the Nubian tectonic plate. Think of the Somalian plate as the mover. It's like the eastward explorer, slowly tugging away from the bigger, older Nubian plate, which is like the African anchor. It's a bit like when you and your friend play tug of war, and one of you starts inching away. These plates are so big, they even have different names. The Somalian plate is sometimes called the Somali plate, and the Nubian plate is occasionally known as the African plate. This tug of war between these plates is what's making the East African Rift happen, and scientists, like those from NASA's Earth Observatory, are like detectives, trying to understand this Earth-sized mystery. So will Africa eventually split in two? And when will this grand separation happen? The answer is still unfolding, and it's an exciting story in the making. The Somalian and Nubian plates are on the move, and they're not just drifting apart from each other, they're also parting ways with the Arabian plate in the north. These plates meet up in Ethiopia's Afar region, where they form an eye-shaped rift system. The clever folks at the Geological Society of London have been keeping an eye on this interesting Earth puzzle. So will Africa keep spreading? And when will this intriguing puzzle be all put together? That's a mystery that's still unfolding. For about 35 million years ago, in the eastern part of Africa, a remarkable process began. It was as though the Earth itself decided to create a colossal divide. Over the eons, this rift continued to widen, like the slow and steady movement of a glacier, eventually reaching as far south as northern Kenya about 25 million years ago. It's a bit like a complex, ongoing geological tale, shaping the remarkable landscape of Africa as it unfolds over millions of years. This rift is like a big earth zipper with two main parts. The first one, the Eastern Rift, goes right through Ethiopia and Kenya, while the other, the Western Rift, forms a curvy path from Uganda to Malawi. The east part is pretty dry, like a desert, while the west side borders the lush rainforest of the Congo. It's a bit like having two very different landscapes side by side. This cool information comes from the Geological Society of London and NASA's Earth Observatory. The eastern and western rifts show us something incredible. Africa is actually spreading apart along various lines. It's like the continent is slowly unzipping itself. This happens at a rate of more than 0.25 inch, that's about 6.35 millimeters each year, according to what Eppinger said. Imagine it's as slow as your toenails growing. Ken McDonald, who's an earth science professor at the University of California, Santa Barbara, explained that right now the process is happening at a really leisurely pace, like how you barely notice your toenails getting longer. It's fascinating to see Africa changing bit by bit over time. The East African Rift probably came to be because of some serious heat rising up from the asthenosphere. That's like the super hot upper part of the Earth's mantle. It happened right between Kenya and Ethiopia, according to the Geological Society of London. This heat made the crust above it get all puffed up and rise, and that's when things started to get interesting. The continental rock, which is quite fragile, began to stretch and break apart. This whole process gave birth to a lot of volcanic action and even created Mount Kilimanjaro, which happens to be the tallest mountain in Africa, as pointed out by NASA's Earth Observatory. It's like a sizzling recipe that cooked up a mountain masterpiece. If Africa were to split apart, there are a couple of ideas about how it could happen. One thought is that most of the Somalian plate might drift away from the rest of Africa, making room for a new sea to form between them. In this scenario, this new land would include places like Somalia, Eritrea, Djibouti, and the eastern parts of Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique, as explained by Eppinger. Another idea is that only eastern Tanzania and Mozambique might separate from the rest of the continent. It's like imagining different ways Africa's pieces could fit together in the future. But here's the twist: Africa might not necessarily split into two. The powerful geological forces that are causing this rift may turn out to be too slow to fully separate the Somalian and Nubian plates, according to what Eppinger mentioned. There's a similar story on the other side of the world, like the Mid-Continent Rift in the upper Midwest of North America, which spans about 1,900 miles, that's roughly 3,000 kilometers. These rifts that don't quite make it are like the unfinished bridges of continents, as explained in a 2022 review in the journal GSA Today. Eppinger pointed out that these failed rifts are found on landmasses all over the globe. In Africa's case, the eastern part of the East African Rift is considered a failed rift, according to the Geological Society of London, meaning it didn't completely split apart. However, the western side is still pretty active. The big question that scientists are trying to solve is what's going to happen next. Will this rifting keep going at the same pace, slowly opening up an ocean like the Red Sea, or could it suddenly speed up and create something much bigger, kind of like a mini Atlantic Ocean? Or maybe it'll just slow down and stop altogether. It's a geological puzzle that keeps the experts guessing. Thank you for your attention.